All right. Hey, Daniel, thanks for
You
joining.
got it. It says recording in progress.
Nice. Thanks for
Okay,
joining the
sorry.
Rideshare Guy channel. Looking forward to talking to you today about your experience driving Uber and Lyft in the different states across the country. Starting out, how long have you been doing rideshare and where did this idea come from?
I've been doing rideshare for about 2 years, and the idea to do it across the country came from originally just doing it in LA and being fascinated with the idea that I would get in my car and have no idea who I would meet and um, what I would learn about them, and it was just then it just kind of snowballed into what it's become now.
Nice. And besides driving people rideshare, are you also doing any delivery apps?
Yes, I do DoorDash, Uber Eats, and Grubhub as well.
Nice. I think that it's interesting because a lot of people, register in one city or, one market, and that's what they stick with. And some people might be nervous or afraid of moving to different cities. What's the process of registering in multiple markets or different cities? And is it hard, easy, as far as the process goes?
There's three options essentially. The For most states, I would say half the states, in my experience, you can just cross the border and start working right away. Then there's probably like 20% of the states. These is all rough estimates, but like maybe 20% where you have to do a state inspection where you pay $20 and they check your headlights, they check your the tread on your tires, things of that nature. And then, like it is in Hawaii, you need to have a driver's license from that state in order to work, which is obviously more complicated.
I see. So every driver probably has different experiences depending on what market they're starting with. Um,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
And are you finding Uber easier than Lyft or Lyft easier than Uber, or is it like,
Lyft easier than Uber.
okay. And then I've also done some delivery driving across different states. So I find that delivery driving is much easier than people driving in multiple markets. Have you found that as well?
Absolutely. And like for example, here in Hawaii, I was able to start doing delivery driving the same day. Um, Whereas it took me like 10 days to get all the paperwork done in order to be able to drive people.
Nice. And we all use a GPS to find our way around, but as we become more familiar with our home markets, we know the downtown areas, we know the good drop-off slots during, events, things like that. So what are some of the challenges you're finding as you move to different markets as far as, even though you have the GPS, I'm sure there's probably still some struggles that you find, in new places.
Yeah, definitely, especially in the Northeast where the cities are more compact. Um, they are more difficult to navigate in, a lot of one ways. Also in the Northeast is difficult because you can go from a really good area to a really bad area in a matter of half a mile less, like literally blocks can be different. Whereas in LA, of course, you have good and bad areas, but there's more distance separating them. So that can be tricky.
I
I
see.
would also, yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
was also gonna say, what's also tricky, and I'm half joking when I say this, but having a Prius with California plates in some parts of the country is just not ideal.
Hmm.
Like, you know, uh, definitely in the Northeast that was the case. Definitely parts of the South that was the case as well.
How do your riders react when you tell them that, oh, I'm, just driving temporarily here in Oklahoma City, but I'm really from Los Angeles? Um,
Most are pretty intrigued by it. But they even know that before they even get into the car because it says it on my profile for the app. So if they happen to check that before entering the car, then they kind of have an idea. But then in my car back home, it says in the rear window, America's first traveling taxi with the QR codes underneath. And obviously I have California plates. So if I'm in Oklahoma City, people don't expect that. So it's a conversation starter. It definitely
mhm.
sparks most people's interest.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because like I live in Cincinnati, and I drive in Cincinnati, and I get people in my car that are from out of town, and they're asking me, what should they see and do when they're in town? Where it sounds like you might be having the opposite way, where you're asking the riders what to see and do when you're in these various cities.
Absolutely. And it's truly something that's like one of the most unique and amazing aspects of doing this across the country is while most tourists go to Cincinnati and Google where's the best chili in town,
Mm,
I asked the locals, and I think that we can all agree there's no better way to get information about a city than asking someone who lives in that city.
mhm.
So I've been able to find dive bars, hole in the wall restaurants, all kinds of very, very unique information just by having locals in the car.
Nice. How long or well, first of all, how many states have you driven in so far? And then how long do you spend in each state? Like, do you just like tick it off your list, or do you try to spend some quality time in each place to really get to know the area and the people?
Um, so it really I've done it so far in just over 30 states. But I will be backtracking because I didn't make content in the beginning, so I want to go back to those states and make content. And how long I spend in the state really depends. There's like New Mexico. I spent like I think a month and a half, maybe a little bit more in New Mexico. I just really fell in love with New Mexico. Um, and then other states, I didn't spend as long. I don't want to say which states I didn't because I don't want to badmouth them, but there's
Hmm.
some states that I like more than others. Also, there's some states that are more appealing to me. There's some states that are more naturally beautiful, have interesting museums, have more to offer than other states.
Yeah. You also have an interesting way of connecting with your riders. I know if people follow your Instagram page, they'll see that. So can you talk a little bit about, some of the stuff you do with your riders and, some of the content that you create?
Yeah, so I have a dash cam in my car, and I look at ride sharing not just as a way to make money, but also as a way to cross paths with people that I would never otherwise cross paths with, and also just to show similarities amongst mankind in general. So I have a dash cam and I'm going to ask my passengers all sorts of questions. Some of the questions are a bit more, some of the questions are a bit um, thought provoking, like what advice would you give to the younger version of yourself? Or what was the best and worst decision you've ever made? Some are related to relationships. For example, um, tell me an outfit your spouse wears that makes your heart skip a beat. Or what is the best and worst thing to say to your spouse after an argument? Or I love asking when I have an old couple in the car, what are the essential traits needed to maintain a 20, 30, 40-year marriage? And like for questions like that, I love that question because the answers are the same. It's the same, you don't have to be a genius to figure it out. It's transparency, being faithful, communication. But when you have people of totally different backgrounds in different parts of the country saying the exact same thing, it just goes to show how similar people are. Um, or my favorite question, another question like that that's great is asking men, where were you and what were your emotions when your wife told you that she's pregnant? Because again, like 99% of men say they were nervous and excited. But when you have different people saying the same thing, it just shows how similar we all are. But some are funny. So for example, yeah, I mean it really just like oh, there's all kinds of questions.
Mm-hmm. And then I often, I mean, I assume that you get permission from them if you share them on your social media channels and stuff, or you have them write down anonymously. I've seen you do that as well. So it sounds like people are pretty open to what you're doing, and probably enjoy being in the car with you because it's just so different than just getting in the car and going from point A to point B and saying goodbye. Which I'm sure some of your rides are probably like that. Not everybody wants to be on the socials, or so you probably just have to
Yeah.
read people. Um, this whole thing about strangers is interesting because like that's one of the things I love about rideshare is getting in the car and meeting people. Like I've done over 10,000 trips over the last 6 years. Um, and recently on the Rideshare Guy channel or social media, somebody asked a question about, what if I get anxiety in talking to strangers or dealing with strangers? And so it sounds like you got probably some good advice for a new driver who like, is afraid of having strangers in their car and, I mean, there is stranger danger, but I mean, I think we have to look past that. And really, most people that get in our car are perfectly nice, safe people to have with us.
Absolutely. And I would say, the fact is that the media loves negativity. And for every one ride that you see in the news where like uh, you know, Uber fight or argument between driver and passenger, there's 10 million that go just fine.
Hmm.
And of those, there's millions that they actually have an interesting conversation. Um, I would also, and that's, one of the reasons why I started making content was because one night I went on YouTube, I typed in Uber, and like 80%, 90% of the content that came up was just fighting and arguing between the driver and the passenger, which completely contradicted the positive interactions that I was having on a daily basis. Most people are normal people. There's always going to be a few nuts, but most people are normal. Most people are, just want to go from A to B. And I would even say, look at it, the idea of having strangers in your car as a blessing because you get to, how often in 2023 do two strangers have a conversation? Like when does that happen? For like even you can go to restaurants and you can see people on the phone, families. So like to have an in-person interaction, you're in a very, very unique position to experience something that most people will never in their lives experience.
Yeah. This is a really good point because, not everybody that gets in my car, wants to have a conversation. You can kind of tell that maybe they just want to have a quiet ride. But I always think to myself, how many more interesting conversations would I have if every rider told me their story or, you know what I mean? Or heard my story. So yeah, I always think that, it's like, the people that do talk, every story is interesting. But then the people that don't talk, I think to myself, what if they would have had the 20-minute conversation with me? I would have maybe learned something interesting or made a connection and things like that. Um, so out of the 30 states you've driven, some top cities or states that you've really enjoyed. I know you said New Mexico, and then maybe states that probably weren't the best when it comes to being a rideshare or food delivery driver or cities.
Uh, okay.
Yeah.
Um, Let me think for a second. So some of the best and some of the worst. Yeah. So the best, like I said, Santa Fe, New Mexico. Another really good one, Nashville, Tennessee. Um, I have to think for a second.
Were these
Miami was a.
good states
Sorry,
because
go ahead.
you made good money there, or you just like the people or the place as far as running
So
around being a tourist?
Santa Fe, I made really good. Yeah, Santa Fe, I loved it because it's beautiful. It's surrounded by amazing nature. I was there in the fall, so the leaves were changing colors. People are there. It's a very artsy town, so you have a lot of tour, and it's touristic town. So people come there to see art. People come there to go hiking, both of which I enjoy. So we had that in common. And yeah, so generally, I also made really good money there because being an Uber driver in touristic areas, people are on vacation, they're in good moods, they're relaxed, they tip better, and also I just like being around people that are in good moods. So that's why I enjoyed. That's why Hawaii's been great too, is because people are on vacation here, so they're happy. Um, Nashville had amazing country music. I was never, I grew up in LA. Country music's not really a thing, but it was definitely interesting to go there and check it out. Miami, I love Spanish. I love Latin culture. Um, so I loved it for that reason. Um, Let me think for a second. I would like to do it in Vegas. I have not done it in Vegas, but I think Vegas would be a lot of fun. And some of the worst places, um, it's kind of tough because so Texas was very mixed. I
Hmm.
really enjoyed a lot of things about Texas. Um, but there were definitely people that judged me because I'm from California and I have a Prius and that in Texas is a statement. Regardless, so people would make these judgments about me before they even got into the car. Most
Hmm.
people were fine. 90, there were only a couple times where like there were some serious judgments made towards me. But to be fair, I would say it's safe to assume that if somebody with Texas plates and a big pickup truck went to California, I'm sure the
Yes,
same would happen to them. So I think it goes both ways.
that makes sense. And then as far as food delivery goes, is food delivery that something that you do in states where you just couldn't, sign up successfully as a rideshare driver, or do you interchange both as far as, running around?
I do it sometimes, like for example, yeah. So when I'm waiting for, so I did it here in Hawaii when I was waiting for the paperwork to be processed,
Mhm.
and if I'm on like a phone call or something, I just do it just to kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
Um,
One thing that I
yeah,
found interesting about doing food delivery during my month-long road trip over the summer was it gave me really good ideas of restaurants to try in the different cities. Um, because I mean, of course, I was picking up from the chain restaurants, but like I was actually in Albuquerque for a week, and there was like this Mexican restaurant I kept picking up from, and I'm like, okay, well, I picked up here 10 times today, so this must be a good place to go try later. So it was a good way to find places to eat, and also it's a really good way to see all the nooks and crannies of different cities and towns. Because if you're a tourist, you're in the downtown areas, but I was like out, you're always out in the suburbs, seeing where people live. So I really, enjoyed that. And honestly, even with food delivery now that we do a lot of like leave at door, and no contact deliveries, the few people that I did talk to at like the doors or at the restaurants, they just love the story that, oh, I'm from Ohio, and I road tripped out here and I'm doing this, just to make some money along the way. So I'm sure even with food deliveries, you probably, people like the story if you talk to them.
absolutely. Yeah, people are they're intrigued by it, and also like what you said about eating at these different restaurants. So like I've tried some foods like that I've never in my life would have tried because I obviously, like you said, if you go there 10 times, there's a reason for it. So I've had that same experience as well.
Nice. How is driving in Hawaii? I mean, I was in Hawaii last year, not as a rideshare driver, but just as a vacationer. And even though it's part of the U.S., it still feels like a whole different world out there. So, what are you finding
Yeah,
it's
it feels like a different planet. I mean, it doesn't feel like America.
mm,
I love it. Like I've really enjoyed. I've only done 2 days of actual rideshare because it took a while to get my driver's license and all of that stuff. But so far it's been great. I've had a good mix of locals and tourists, and it's very easy to drive here because people are extremely relaxed, almost to a fault, but
hmm.
not quite. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Um, and yeah, I mean it's beautiful driving here. It's obviously it's a beautiful island, and I really like it. It takes some it takes some adjusting because for example, like things are I mean, some things are like insanely expensive, like
Hmm.
milk. But the cost and gas also is very expensive here. But all things considered, it's been amazing, and I've been learning how to surf here. I picked up somebody 2 days ago, one of my first riders here, and he's gonna teach me how to surf. And
Oh,
that would have never
nice,
happened had I not been doing this.
nice. Now the one thing that all rideshare drivers really care about is money. So, talk about the difference in earnings and prices across different states. Like Iowa versus Hawaii. Can you see a difference in earnings when you're in a state that's more expensive or?
Yeah, states that are more expensive, their earnings are generally better, and I believe the reason for that is you need to have a lot of money to live in Hawaii, right? And on the average Uber driver's salary, he generally can't afford to live here. So because of the shortage of drivers, there's a surge in pricing. So they actually make more money here. And but it kind of also, but also like you definitely it would be wise to get a fuel efficient car if you come here. Because gas is, 4.50, $5 a gallon. Um, so But you get also get really long rides. So like I've had two couples so far go from Honolulu to the North Shore, which is about an hour drive. And you talk to them on the way. I also have some condiments and different things in the car to offer to the passengers, and that gets my tips. I get a lot of tip money because of that. I
Nice.
would also advise Uber drivers to utilize different to make themselves unique and like have different ways to try and make extra money. If you're already going to be here driving them, like have some drinks, have some snack, like do something in order to make extra money on top.
Hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of negativity when it comes to rideshare driving and how much, the Uber pays or how much money they, keep from, the passengers for themselves versus the riders. But I think that it's best to just, do what we can in our control to make the business work for us. And truly, rideshare is our own business. You know what I mean? We decide what rides we take, we decide, where we go. So that's what I like about it. We're literally in control. And like you said, you're doing things above and beyond what Uber, Lyft, expect of you. And it sounds like it's paying off as as far as your business. Uh, any memorable riders you've had over this adventure of driving in 30 states, or stories that you can share, like I don't know, famous people or people that, you didn't expect in your car and they got in your car. I don't know if you.
Yeah. Well, I will again just preface this by saying that one of my favorite parts of doing this job is the idea that, you get to cross paths with all these different kinds of people. Um, so the one, and you can choose to obviously edit this out, but the one that stands out to me the most that I'll never forget is when I was in Albuquerque. I picked up a drug addicted prostitute. And there's certain segments of the population that I think most people would see them and judge, including myself. And but when you actually talk to somebody in person, hear their story, it's it it and I can only speak for myself, but it impacted me because when am I gonna cross paths with somebody who lives that life? Never.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually became friends, and we had lunch a couple times while I was in Albuquerque, and I'm actually still in touch with her, and she's going to nursing school now, and
Oh,
she's
wow.
totally changed her life around. And I think it's because um, our for one, I was one of the only men in her life that just was platonic,
Mm-hmm.
and I listened to her, and so that made me feel really good. Someone else, had a guy in Florida who was dying. He was terminally ill, and I gave him a ride, and then we also became friendly while I was there, and just that was fast. I don't want, and that was interesting, and it was. I learned a lot from that experience because when somebody is close to death, and when it's inevitable, although it is for all of us, right? But like when it's like that close, how could you not look at life differently? So having that experience was. Go ahead.
No, sorry, you're cutting out a little bit.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's interesting. And,
Oh, okay.
unfortunately, a lot of, I think drivers, will look at, oh, I don't want to go this part of town. I want to go that part of town. But really, it's the people that you're picking up, not the parts of town, is what I believe. So, like in Cincinnati, there are rough parts of town. And sometimes I think to myself, do I really want to drive over there? But, if the passenger has, if, they have a good rating, there's nothing that I can't say, why should I not drive this part of town? And, oftentimes it's the person in the car that's the difference. I mean? Forget what part of town you're going to. So I think you probably feel the same way. You're not afraid of parts of town. It's about the people getting in your car.
Yeah, of course. And if someone has, 100, 200 5-star reviews,
Hmm.
feel comfortable.
Exactly. Awesome. Awesome. Well, for a wrap up, anything else you want to share as far as advice to, other Uber, Lyft, DoorDash drivers that may want to, venture out of their home states and go drive somewhere else? And then also, where can people follow you online, as far as, Instagram, YouTube, wherever you have content so people can connect with you?
Yeah, so if I was to say one last thing to anyone interested, I would say go for it. Life's short and you'll have such an amazing time. And although some people might look at the unknown as scary, look at it as the opportunity to have a truly amazing, amazing experience. And feel free to contact me if you have any questions or need advice. My handle across social media and YouTube is my thumb life.
Nice. You want to tell us real quick where that comes from?
Oh, so I spend part of the year also traveling by hitchhike. Um, so that's where, like, when you're hitchhiking, you have your thumb out like that. So
That's that is
yeah.
very interesting because people are like stranger danger when it comes to hitchhiking, but you are having people in your car all the time, so it's going both ways. So I can see where that'd be a very comfortable thing for you. Well, Daniel,
Yeah.
thanks so much for coming on the channel and chatting with me today. And I think
Thank you for having me.
you're welcome. I think riders are going to find this very fascinating and realize that it's a lot easier to, sign up in other states and, maybe even like if they're traveling, to spend some time doing some rideshare to make some, money back from their journeys.
Yeah, absolutely.